This is actress Vdia Ghaffari, and you're watching The 13th Wolfman. Oh!
Awesome.
من هنرپیشه هستم به نام ویدا غفاری با دارین 13ام مرد گرگ رو تماشا میکنی.
Hey everybody, I'm the 13th Wolfman, and you know what? I have a young lady with me today, Vida Ghaffari. She's an actress with quite a few credits to her name. She's been in Mind of Mencia. She was in The Bay. She was in The Mini Project, and now she's got a movie out called Holy Terror. Welcome to Sit Down, Vida.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on your show, especially honored given that you know so much movie trivia, and especially honored that you said my name correctly. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I try to get the names right because, well, I have my regular name, I go by the 13th Wolfman on here, but my regular name, a lot of people mispronounce it. So, you know, I try to not do that to other people.
Oh, it's very sweet of you. It's very thoughtful. But I don't think anything would be as hard to pronounce for most Westerners as Vdia Ghaffari, but go figure.
You know, when I was looking at how it was spelled, Ghaffari made sense. I just did the phonetic thing, Ga, and then Fari. I mean, and Vida, what a beautiful name.
Thank you. Aw shucks. Yeah, I wish it would be so easy for casting people to pronounce when I've done auditions and whatnot. So thank you.
Did you ever, I mean, there are those actresses and actors that I see in movies that have those names, and you just go, okay, the reason that this person isn't famous is because they got a difficult. Did you ever think about westernizing and going with a stage name?
You know, I had an agent when I first started out. He represented really big people and really little people, like giants and little people. And I was like, do I want to sign with this guy? And then I thought, well, you know, I won't have any competition because they're big people. And I'm not being sarcastic. No, bum. I just thought it would be good for me because he didn't have anybody of my type, like a normal height person. I'm 5'4" and a character ethnic woman. So I thought, okay, well, there's not going to be any conflicts. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of us in Southern California. And he's like, I won't sign you unless you change your name. And I changed my last name, and I was very uncomfortable about it. And I felt like I had more success with my unusual name, if that makes sense. And I felt more true to myself. I come from a very artistic family, so it was very hard not to use the Ghaffari. So I just went back to it. But I'll never forget this guy is like, yeah, I won't sign you unless you change your name. So that was my experience with a name change. And it was very confusing on my IMDb. You'll see it. It's funny. You're quite the interviewer because it's something that's never come up before. But I think in this day and age, I think 10, 15 years ago, it would have been weird. But now there's all sorts of unusual names. It's truly become a global marketplace of film.
Oh, no, that's very true. But I think of like, he was on Heroes, and I could never say his name right, but his name is Vito Villamina or something like that. And that's the thing. It's like when you look at
Vincent Malagina or something. It's like Italian or Brazilian or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I think, wow, you know, I mean, if he just taken out like, I mean, you can go by your regular name in life, but I mean, if you just take out part of that and made it a little bit easier, might have gotten him a little bit farther because the last name's so hard to pronounce, you know?
But isn't he in This Is Us? That's a big show.
Yeah, no, I mean, but from the time that was on and that went off the air, it's like you never really heard anything about him after that.
That's true until he went back on this show. But part of me thinks the unusual name stands out more. Nobody ever forgets me. I'm sure if I was like Sarah Smith, I'd be forgotten.
Very true. Very true. But then, I mean, then you look at other famous actors like Archibald Leach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't know who Archie Leach is, right? But do you know who Cary Grant is?
Yes.
Archibald Leach.
No, you got to go on Jeopardy or something. You'd win the movie trivia section. I wouldn't want to go
Yeah,
on Jeopardy with you. I can tell you that much.
yeah, but that's only one section. It's the other 5 categories I'd probably have problems with.
You compensate with your movie trivia. I'm assuming.
But so how did you get into acting? I mean, let's start at the beginning and give us a little insight
Sure.
on it.
Of course, I minored. I had a very strict Persian father, not religiously, but culturally. He's like, well, he was a mathematician and a scientist. He's like, well, you're not going to be a scientist or a mathematician. I can hook you up with a job at the World Bank. There's a certain kind of tax you don't have to pay, which is not true, only if you're a foreign national. So he had me study economics, and I minored in theater and journalism. And I actually performed at my Black Box Theater at University of Maryland. They had a very good theater school, actually, and a very good journalism school. And it's funny, it all came full circle for me because the guy that designed the Black Box Theater at University of Maryland, Carl Warren, is the head of the Screen Actors Guild Conservatory out here in Los Angeles. So the theater that I performed in was created and painted and put together by one of the people who, eventually started, teaching me and instructing me when I joined the Screen Actors Guild. So that was a wonderful experience. I worked on Capitol Hill as a journalist. I acted a lot in college. I did sketch comedy. I did improv. I was on my campus radio. I did a lot of that kind of stuff, but it was very limiting because I was in Washington, D.C. I came out here to be a reporter. I was a reporter, non-religious, non-political for Persian television, and I would voice their promos. And occasionally they had soap operas and they were in English and Farsi. And I would, my English, I'm a native speaker. So they get twice the work for half the pay, which is kind of how they operate. It's very low budget. And I would start doing their promos in English and Farsi. And from that became my voiceover career. I put a demo together and I started doing voiceover, mostly industrials and narration, a lot of commercials when I first started. So did a lot of voiceover. Did acting as well. I often would play reporters, given my background. So that's how it all evolved. And then it just evolved into more character roles. And then it just evolved into all this. But I really wish that my dad was offered 2 jobs out here. I would have been born here instead of Washington, D.C. I think it would have been much easier for me as an artist to grow up here, as opposed to start back east and come here. But I do like to think I have a good view of things, being born and raised there and then coming out here.
Oh,
So that's
yeah.
basically experience.
But you know what they say about all the stars in Hollywood? No one's from California. They all come to California.
That's a good point. And you would know with all your trivia.
But no, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing that, a lot of people, they say I wasn't born in California. My cousin lives in California and she wasn't born there. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But was there any like movie or any TV show that just kind of gave you the bite that said I want to do acting?
I have to tell you, I had a very interesting childhood. My parents were supposed to go back to Iran. My dad worked for the U.S. government. Nothing bad ever happened, but it was a little sticky. Things were really bad there. So they had basically been preparing to go back. It didn't work out that way for them, unfortunately. So the revolution happened. My dad was a professor. He mentored a lot of young people. Our house was full of people. This was well after the revolution. I feel like on the weekend, sometimes we'd go to the airport like twice in a day to pick up people. What I'm trying to say is I had to adapt to growing up with a lot of people it's funny the way the world has turned, not to get political, that were immigrants, that were refugees, people that basically, were trying to find their way. They were doing well in their own country and they were coming here and, they kind of kept to themselves. They're just trying to create a new life. So my parents were preoccupied. My dad was trying to get them into colleges and universities. And this is before the internet. After the hostage crisis, Iranian students had taken hostages. They're not exactly well loved by colleges and universities in the United States. So my dad was very preoccupied with them. So what did I have in front of me was a television. So I would love to watch TV. I had an older parents, so I would love to watch, Flip Wilson, Carol Burnett reruns, all these reruns of shows. I was referencing Gilligan's Island, Star Trek, all these shows we would watch, Three's Company and reruns, of course. So I love like the classic shticky comedies. And I think it's because of sitting in front of the TV for hours on end as a child. So I really enjoyed it. It was really a nice outlet for me because, my parents were dealing with like the tragedy of people's lives and helping them adapt to America and, helping them learn English. So, I had to deal with that. And not that I'm complaining, I had a great worldview. But I think another thing that kind of formed me was a lot of these young people were living in our house or visiting us, and they were like college age people. So, they were older than us, and they would watch like these Star Trek and the Three's Company and like Sanford and Son. I mean, I was a small child. I was not watching like the Electric Company. My parents, I guess, were pretty liberal. A lot of my friends weren't allowed to watch Three's Company because it was about a guy living with two women. And let's face it, Bethesda, Maryland's a pretty conservative place. So I feel like I got kind of an interesting worldview, and I just really enjoyed television. It was a great outlet for me. I had a very interesting childhood. I will say I was often bullied. So I feel like TV was all I had. And even though I was born and raised in this country, there were all these foreign speaking people in my house. I had to go to ESOL class, very humbling experience, even though I was a Native American speaker. And not Native American, but, an American person born and raised in this country.
Yeah,
so I think TV really helped me with my pronunciation and like American idioms, So
yeah.
my parents had been in this country a long time, but they didn't. My dad would teach at universities here, but a lot of sayings like he wouldn't understand. So I think it really opened me up to the culture, if that makes sense.
Oh,
So that was also a part
sense.
of it.
Yeah, we have a lot of idioms here.
We do.
That kind of sucks for your dad. I mean, just thinking when someone's just trying to give him a compliment and he just doesn't get it or something, I mean, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, and he worked with like really like my dad was a scientist. He worked at NASA, so he worked with like the most American of American people. Like guys that drank Heineken. My dad was a Johnny Walker man. Not to say that he's snobby or anything. He's from another country, but he grew to love Heineken, chicken wings. So even though he was very much the foreigner, he really loved this country, but he still never got the idioms. So it was interesting. It was an interesting upbringing. It was a difficult but interesting time. So I really learned a lot about American culture. Is everything I learned was from television. And the friends that he did have were from all over the place. They weren't just Iranians. They were from, different countries. So I really wasn't exposed, and I'm from DC. So everybody's from another place, right? So
Right.
I wasn't really exposed to like Americana American until, I guess when I went to like junior high school and high school. But it was interesting. Like I had classmates that were from Kenya, Ghana, Belgium. It wasn't like, there were American people, but it was just different. They were like, it was weird. They were like the minority because there were all these embassies, and these were kids of the embassy people, the World Bank people. So I got a world view, but I really learned about life through, Happy Days reruns and Three's Company. So it was interesting.
That would have been interesting, having all those children of like embassy people. That would have been an interesting time, a place to grow up.
It would make a great sitcom. And it's funny, there was all these deposed royals living where I'm from. Like, they're not Greek, but like from African countries. But they were like real Nigerian princes, not like the fake ones that want your money. And they, you know what I mean? So it was interesting. Or like, somebody that was like related to a Maharaja, but they were like totally legit. Because I will say LA, there's a lot of illegitimate royalty. But it was, it was an interesting time, to say the least. Yeah. Would make a great sitcom. I should write it. Yeah.
So you got a movie, Holy Terror.
Yes.
How'd you get into this movie?
It's funny, when I first started acting, what most young women do is I ended up doing a lot of horror films. I was never the girl that was like, the girl that gets naked and is a lead girl. I was always the character girl. I was always the friend of the girl. I would never make it past like one or two scenes, like a typical character actress. So I found it very interesting that my career has come full circle when I played the role of Haley. Haley is a very tormented woman. And it was a great role to play because usually Most horror films are very schlocky that I've done. This was the first horror film that I did that was actually horrific. It wasn't so schlocky, like my fake heart beating out of my chest, or, just
Right.
like the typical splat, she's dead with a fake blood gushing everywhere. So I mean, there was fake blood, but it looked a lot more legitimate. I was exercised, if you will. It was a wonderful shoot. I worked with incredible actors, Christine DeBelle from The Big Brawl and Meatballs. There's a classic cult stars like her, Mel Novak from Bruce Lee's Game of Death, Chuck Norris is An Eye for an Eye, Lisa
Yep.
London, who was in Dragnet. So it was great classical actors. Also worked with in my scenes with Scott Butler. He was in Wiener Dog Internationals, up and coming actors as well. So it was a wonderful experience. Gregory Hatanaka is a genius. It was an honor working with him. One of my favorite movies is Mad Cowgirl, which he made. And it was great to work with him. He was the executive producer and he was also the cinematographer. The writer-director was Rich Mallory, who also made Sociopathia. So it was very evocative of, say, certain movies from the 70s and 80s, like The Conjuring, and movies about exorcism. So I did a lot of research. It was a very compelling project to work on many levels for me.
Well, we have the trailer for it. Would you like to introduce it?
For sure. Here's the trailer.
Do you feel anything unusual in this house?
By unusual, do you mean, do I sense any spirits?
I think Joshua is trying to contact me. I think that he's still here.
Before we attempt this, there's something you both need to understand. What we contact may not be your son. There's no way of knowing what we're dealing with until I initiate contact.
And there you go. That's the trailer. Looks like a great movie. Vida, we gotta wrap it up so we can start the live show. So if
Sure.
people are trying to find you, where are they? Where should they look for you on the net?
They can find me I have a blog, So Very Vida, and they can also find me at Vdia Ghaffari, Vidaghaffi, like Frank Ari. There's also official Vdia Ghaffari on Facebook. Twitter and Instagram is Vdia Ghaffari. And also, if I may plug, starting Saturday, April 1st till the end of this month, this film is exclusively premiering on Amazon Prime. We had our world premiere last week, which was also the premiere of my other film, Hybristophilia, starring Quentin Aaron in The Blind Side and some other amazing actors. So please note, if you want to see the film, it's on Amazon Prime until the end of the month. Please check it out. Please rate it. Please share it. Holy Terror on Amazon Prime exclusively.
Yes. And I agree with her. Please check out Holy Terror. Check out Vida and all her co-stars in this movie. It's a fun film. And I love horror films, and this is definitely one I highly say check out. For Vdia Ghaffari, I of course am the 13th Wolfman, and I'm on the prowl.